My mom's on YouTube. Good night, everybody.
Okay, welcome. Out of respect for your time, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're still working on getting the Facebook link set up for those who couldn't attend in person. So there might be, thank you, some equipment being shuffled around, and that's okay. Welcome. My name is Adam Stevenson. I'm a pediatrician. I work at Primary Children's Hospital, and my side hustle over here is as the Associate Dean of Student Affairs for the medical school. Had the chance to get to know your students this week as we've submitted them to 8 hours a day of sitting in chairs and talking to each other. I look forward to getting to know you a little bit. My intent today is to simply offer kind of a big picture overview of what your students will be going through and offer myself up for questions and then some resources for you to use. So if I can, maybe at the beginning, just a sense of who we have here today. Those who are in the spouse, partner, significant other group. Fair, have about 10 of those. Great. Those that are in the parent, step-parent, very nice. And any in the grandparent realm of the students. And then I believe we have, I'm assuming, one daughter. Okay. Very good. Are there any other categories that I failed to ask about or mention? Siblings sometimes, other? Sibling, very nice. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with maybe some big picture. I'm happy to answer questions as we go throughout. Please feel free to interrupt. We talked with your students a little bit about, so I'm sorry, most of this is going to be repeat for the students. My intent is to speak to the partners, spouses, and support group. So this is a representation we've been talking with the students about regarding what the 4 years of medical school are going to look like. It's broken up into 4 years, but when we also talk about 4 different phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And maybe we'll go a little bit through each section so you can see just what life is going to look like in each one. Phase 1, which is from now until December. Phase 1 consists of your students being involved in primarily these green foundational medicine courses. For some of them, this will look familiar. It's getting everyone up to speed in terms of biochemistry, anatomy, routine foundational science stuff. We started off with a course called Foundations of Medicine. In addition to that, as the core medicine, there is a course called the Clinical Skills or CMC course, and that's teaching them not biochemistry and not anatomy, but how to talk to patients. And through that course, they will actually start seeing patients fairly soon. In addition to that, then we have Layers of Medicine, which meets intermittently through the semester. Layers of Medicine talks more about the humanities of medicine, some of the art, some of the controversial social topics as part of how to discuss and teach in teams. That's the coursework that your students will be involved in. How this manifests itself is for them primarily lectures occurring in the afternoon, with the mornings for most days being left open for study time. And there's a significant amount of study time. That's not necessarily free time, but the time that they're not expected to be in lecture. We have quizzes which occur typically on Mondays, usually every other week with some exceptions. And you will get to know with your student when it's a, quote, quiz weekend and when it isn't, because they sometimes kind of go deep, go dark, and to study. Those quizzes all contribute to a score for the course, and all students need to do is pass. Those are pass-fail courses. In fact, all courses are pass-fail throughout the first 2 years of medical school. And that goes to a winter break, and then it continues on with a course called MCC, or Molecule Cells and Cancer, and then a course called Host and Defense. And then near April or May, we begin a 10-week summer break, which oftentimes starts with research, but can include anything. It can include travel, it can include wellness, respite time, can include leadership, service, and other extracurricular portions. I've talked to the students today about planning that 10 weeks very carefully. It's really the last large block of time they'll have off for a very long time. And they'll talk with you, I assume, about what the plans are for those 10 weeks. Let me pause there. That takes us through the first part of, or all of phase 1 and halfway into phase 2, encompassing the entire year. Any questions I can answer for you about what life is like otherwise during the first phase of medical school, first year of medical school? You should expect some late nights, especially around quiz weekends. To be honest, we talk a lot in medicine about how hard medical school is, and it is. But it always reminds me of my little girl, Ruth, who told my younger son, Mac, about how hard the transition from kindergarten to first grade was, and how difficult it's going to be going from half day to full day. And it was hard for him, and it was difficult, and he had to take some naps, and he was really tired. But the transition is okay, right? Your students have worked really hard to get where they are, and you've worked really hard to support them, and it's going to be fine. It's going to seem actually fairly normal, maybe just a little bit amped up than before. Second year is a lot of the same. Harder material, more material, a little bit more complexity, but continuing on with layers of medicine, continuing on with their CMC group, and continuing on with core foundational courses. One of the things you'll hear students talk about is in all of these courses, small group learning in their cohort, their CMC group or their TBL group. Small groups so they get to know each other really, really well. That takes them to the end of year 2, end of phase 2, which then starts what we call dedicated study time. There's this test called USMLE Step 1. It's the first of 3 tests that will get your student board certified. There was an extreme, inordinate amount of pressure on Step 1. Entire industries were developed in order to get good scores on Step 1, even above and beyond MCATs. And your student is in the second group of students who will no longer receive a score for Step 1. Instead, it will just be pass-fail. Still pressure to do well, still pressure to pass, and there'll be pressure on the second version of that, which is called Step 2 CK over here. But I think dedicated study time for you and your student are going to be very different than past years. Dedicated study time can be anywhere from 1 to about 8 weeks, depending on your student's preparation level. They choose the date of their exam. It just has to be accomplished before, it has to be taken before they can start phase 3. Phase 3 usually starts in June. And phase 3 is very, very different. The first 2 years right now, we're right now what's called the classic 2 and 2 curriculum. 2 years of basic science, a lot of sitting here, a little bit of seeing patients, but most of it is right here. And then third year and fourth year, they don't see this building ever again, and they're often clinics and hospitals throughout the state. So third year is a completely different animal. In fact, I wanted to maybe dive down into a little bit about third year looks like a little bit more. This is the graphic of the third year schedule. Each column on this Excel spreadsheet is a week, and there are 7 required clerkships that your student must complete. Internal medicine, surgery are both 8 weeks long. Pediatrics, OB-GYN, family medicine, and psychiatry are 6 weeks long, and then neurology is 4 weeks long. And your student will select some preferences, get a schedule kicked back to them that somehow Tetrises all of these options together, and forms a continuous schedule through the 3 years. And they'll jump from, I've been on 8 weeks of medicine, and now I'm on 4 weeks of neurology, and now I'm on 6 weeks of pediatrics. Throughout that, then, there are a 2-week winter break, as well as 4 weeks of electives that they can choose to do radiology or anesthesiology or pathology that help them guide their specialty choice. And that's what life is like in third year, is chunks of time. We are focused on one specialty. There's a test at the end of each block that is stressful and students have to study for. And then all of a sudden you study for it, that block's over, and the next Monday you start all over again on a different specialty. Hours here are typically in the 70 to 80 hours per week range. And more so than the total number of hours is the difficulty, this is what I hear from partners and spouses most, is the difficulty in planning. You just don't know when you're going to be done. It's not an 8 to 5 job. It's a when the last patient comes in or when I get everyone tucked in. And you might have someone get sick and you're there till midnight. You might have a slow day admissions and your resident sends you home at 4:30 and you won't know until 5 minutes beforehand. So it's the uncertainty that makes the third year planning a little bit more difficult. Certainly life is much different for students and for partners and spouses here than it is in the first 2 years. In fact, we have some students who actually, one or two that live up in Weber County or in Utah County and come up and make the commute, but that is proven to be really difficult during the clerkship year, and a lot of students actually move close to campus during the clerkship year. Questions I can answer about what the clerkship third year looks like. Anything at all? Yes, please.
I'm wondering which step of the 3 tests helps with residency placement?
Which of the 3 tests help with residency placement? Yeah, so there's step 1, which we talked about, which occurs between the second and third year and is now pass-fail. It's not going to help really at now, other than as long as you don't fail. We think, we don't know yet, that of the unintended consequences of step 1 going pass-fail. I talked with the students today that I think that there's 3 likely consequences of that. The first is there's going to be an inordinate amount of pressure now on step 2 CK, which we haven't talked about yet. And I think that's the answer to your question, is it's going to be step 2 CK. The other 2 that I think are going to be more important now is actually clerkship grades are going to be of a higher importance now without a step 1 score. And then extracurricular stuff that your students do is going to be scrutinized more because there's not a 3-digit score to filter students by. Step 3 is an exam that actually occurs after your first year of residency. So only the first 2 of those 3 exams occur during medical school. So the answer is CK. Yes, please.
You mentioned that a lot of people move when it's time for third year. Does that mean we should expect that these are mostly in and around Salt Lake?
Yeah, let me clarify that. Most people don't move during third years, but those who were successful in being quite remote during the first 2 years find that they're not successful anymore, and those move. But that's still 4 or 5 students in the class. To answer the second part of your question, though, most of these rotations are here. Our main hospitals are the University of Utah, Primary Children's, the Huntsman Cancer, VA, Intermountain Medical Center downtown, that and LDS Hospital. That comprises probably 80 to 90% of the rotations. For family medicine actually is not in hospitals but out in clinics, and they are spread out throughout the entire state. And your students will have the opportunity, if they choose to go quite remote, like down to Ephraim, Manti, Blanding, up to Logan if they want to. There's housing that is provided for that if it is at a remote site. That's a great opportunity for people, but sometimes it doesn't fit well with the family dynamic, and you can choose to remain here in the Wasatch Front. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Other questions on third year? Okay. So fourth year. Fourth year is full of what's called sub-Is. Stands for sub-internships, where your student pretends to be an intern for a month. And then their performance on that is highly scrutinized to see if they're going to be able to, quote, cut it as being a real intern. So you'll hear students talk about, planning the sub-I really well. Where is it going to be and when is it going to be? Let's look at a little bit more in terms of what the fourth year looks like. This is the fourth year in 4-week blocks. And the key is right here in the middle of September, all students across the country apply to residency programs. And then this time frame is for interviewing and deciding where to go and ranking. And then your students will match here in block 10 to a residency program. So really this year is broken up into thirds. A pre-application time frame, a interview time frame, and then a matching time frame. And it's about to 3 blocks each. This time is actually quite difficult for a couple of reasons. You're doing these so-called sub-Is, which are really important and intense, and mimic the hours of a resident. 2, many specialties, not all, but many specialties either require or highly suggest an away rotation, where you need to go to UCSF or to Baylor or to NYU for a month and do another sub-I there and perform, and that causes some travel disruption. In the midst of all that, you then need to get your application together, and you need to take step 2 CK, which typically occurs right here. So this time frame is actually quite hectic. After that is beautiful. Your rotations are done, your application is in, you're traveling around the country, taking your spouse or partner or family member with you to see some interviews. And you've got most of your electives done. And there's actually time here that students can have 3 of these 11 blocks off. Now, one of those blocks is typically for CK studying, and the other 2 blocks are typically for interviewing. But there's a lot of flexibility in the remainder portions of the 4th year. And then we have match day, which is again here in March. Commencement will be May 2025, which is super cool and fun. But match day, I think, is really where the fun is, where your student learns which residency program they match to. We can go into the details of matching if you want. It's a complicated thing. It is not the typical job finding. Instead, your student applies, interviews, ranks, and that rank list is put into a massive computer and compared with a rank list of all the programs that they applied to, and specific matches are made. So your student, this is actually a fun but stressful day. You and your student won't know where they're spending the next 3 to 6 years of their life until they open their envelope on March 16th, 2025. And it's streamed, and there's tears, and there's celebrations all throughout the country, and everyone across the country opens their envelope at exactly the same time. And then off to internship. Residency, potentially fellowship, and then being a physician. And that's kind of the journey. Questions about that process that any of you have? Whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. It's my job to take your students from today all the way to graduation to match and get them a job. And I love my job. I talked to your students today about this is where they need to focus. The first thing they need to focus on is their wellness, their relationships with you, the way they communicate with you, their happiness. Yes, they're going to be busy. Yes, they're going to be lots of things on their plate. But wellness and relationships are their first priority. Second priority is performance in the curriculum. That has to be important. It has to be key, but not to the detriment of your individual wellness. And then I talked with them about after those are settled and set, then it's time to explore, to do some leadership, to do some extracurricular. With step 1 going pass-fail, we talked about that these things are becoming more and more important, and they need to think of themes. They need to think of personal branding. They need to think of professional identity and cobble together activities throughout the 4 years that support those themes that they choose. For example, a student could choose to be a pediatrician, but academic, oh, they'll come back, academic research focused. Or someone could choose to be a pediatrician that is focused on rural care and underserved and global health. Completely different jobs in the end, completely different activities, but the same specialty and the same matching. Okay, so we talked to them about scholarly activity, career exploration, service, academic success. I wanted to show you the team of people that are around to help make your student be successful. The upper leadership includes our Senior Vice President for Health Sciences, our Dean, and then our Vice Dean of Education. We have admissions group, Dr. Chan, which your students know well. Dr. Chan hands the students over to me in Student Affairs, and we have, as part of Student Affairs, a wellness program, an academic success program, and a global health program. I'll talk about them just a little bit more in a minute. We also have an Office of Diversity, Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or HEDI. And then under the curriculum group, we have basic science deans, we have clinical deans, and we have someone who's assessing quality. So in Student Affairs, the three programs that your students will interact with quite a bit are wellness, academic success, and global health. Dr. Michelle Vo runs our wellness program. She is a licensed psychiatrist, and she runs a clinical program where students have free access to mental health care. That mental health care is HIPAA protected. It's a completely different electronic medical record than our hospital. Students can receive medications and cognitive therapy through that. Our academic success program runs our tutoring program, our academic coaching. They have vouchers for practice tests. They have library. They have tests for learning style. They will help your student be the best academic performer that they can. And then our global health office under Dr. Ty Dickerson helps students get international electives, international experience, and rural and underserved experiences as well. In addition to all those people then, under Student Affairs, so that includes, we've talked about global health, wellness, and academic success, but we also have an events coordinator. We have an extensive mentoring office. That's Brittany down here. Say hi, Brittany. Our registrar's office, and then in the back, we have our financial aid support. Wendy, did you want to say anything to this group? Anything you wanted to help them understand?
The main thing I want to make sure that everyone is aware of is that you are welcome to contact me if your spouse wants you to help or your significant other wants you to help and needs you to help. I will speak with the student, I will speak with the spouse. As long as I have permission from the student themselves, I'd love to help as many as I possibly can. It's really important to know that if you do get in a bind or if there's something going on that is really causing the stress, you can reach out to us. We're here to help, and we want to do everything and anything we can.
Thank you, Wendy. It's good to have you here. Wendy is an expert. I don't know what we would do without her assistance. And if you have any questions about emergency loans, cost of attendance, tuition, fees, scholarships, she is the go-to person. And that's the support team. There is a significant other support group that is run through our wellness program. It meets monthly in the evenings. It's a space for partners, spouses, and significant others to discuss, process, see how things are going, both for them and for their student, and explore ways that they and their student can thrive together. For those in the room who are not students, I would encourage you to be part of this. You would reach out to our wellness program, and your students have that contact information to be part of the students or significant other support group. And then lastly, my personal opinions about how I think you can best help your student. First off, encourage and enable them to do rejuvenating activities. We talked today about whatever it is that really just gets them energized again. It could be skiing, it could be singing, it could be scouts, it could be anything. They still need to do those things. They probably won't have as much time to do it as frequently, but if they're used to getting in a hike every week, help them get a hike in every month and still do those things that they love. Help them with social connection, especially with each other, the other medical students. There are a lot of events. They may not tell you about all of them. Ask them about them. See if you can go with them to them. Including, I think we had a big SIB event 2 nights ago, and we have an all-class picnic coming up at the end of the month. Now, you do want to manage that tricky balance of Not hovering, of course, not being involved in every day-to-day detail, but also being informed and involved. You'll find that balance for you in your relationship, but there is a balance there. Be flexible with their time and availability. Sometimes it's a grumpy time. Sometimes there's a quiz coming up. Sometimes they're on a stressful rotation that they're not managing well, and you need to help them and talk with them about that. Some routine changes are fine, but watch out for serious things. If you're seeing anything that's worrisome, our wellness team, myself, we can help. This is rare, but if you're seeing anything, communicate with them and share with them how you're feeling. Refer them to resources such as the wellness program if needed. One thing I really need your help with, I think, is helping your students identify their specialty interest. It is not uncommon for a student to be confused about what specialty they should go into, and when they talk with their support team, they say, when you were on medicine, you were miserable, but when you were on surgery, even though it was longer hours, you came home excited, you were telling me all about it, you were waking up to go, and I've just never seen you that excited. I think you should go into surgery. Conversations such as that. So watch them as they go through their rotations. Enjoy the journey with them and have fun. You'll never forget the times you have in medical school. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's a great 4 years. And I'm privileged to be able to be there with them and be there with you. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, ways that I can support you, ways that I can support your students. Anybody? Worries you have, things are unclear, resources that you think you need?
So is there any way in the future you can make this less stressful for the students?
I hope so. That's always our goal, is to minimize things. I think the step one change is a really important one. I think there's some changes potentially coming to the matching process that will be really helpful. At the same time, we do balance it with life as a physician. Life as a physician is taxing, and we need to ramp you up to that and get you prepared for some long hours and some long times. But I think that you'll find that your medical school experience is very, very different than mine was. And it's a different animal than Grey's Anatomy, and it's a different animal than ER. It's not like that anymore. So hopefully it's better. We'll see. Please.
So you mentioned that the first 2 years, a lot of students get away with doing it remote. Is that because lectures are recorded?
Yeah, so some of that is actually partially COVID related. Like this past year, in fact, I think we had some students that even lived out of state and then came in once a week for exams. That's kind of gone. That's not necessarily there. We are doing in person. But what you'll find, when you're on clerkships, for example, the OB clerkship starts at 4:30 in the morning. There's not really public transportation that is available at that point. So now you're driving a car in from Utah County or somewhere else. When your classes right now start at 1, that's easier to commute into. So I think that the remote part is not necessarily that they're attending lectures remotely anymore. That was kind of COVID times. But it's just that the flexibility in travel allows most of the studying could be done at home if that's what you chose to set up. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are like, I'm not going to be able to study at home. It's too crazy here. I'm coming up to the library at 8 o'clock. I'm studying from 8 to noon. I'm going to attend class from 1 to 4, 1 to 5, and I'm coming home and treat it like more an 8 to 5 job. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Please.
So, what would be the best way to support your students when you're like miles away and they're coming to a new city and they're very busy? So, what would be the best way to morally support them?
Yeah, so if I understand, what's the best way to support them when you're miles away from them? Yeah, at a distance. The first response I would have is, I think you need to ask him. For example, my daughter is starting law school in 10 days and going through a similar orientation right now. And I have the same question, like, do you want me to call you every day and see how class went? Or is that going to drive you totally nuts? Do you want me just to check and see how quizzes and exams went? Do you want me to fly up monthly and buy you groceries? And I actually don't know. I haven't had that conversation with her yet, but that's the conversation I would encourage you to have. Like, okay, how are we going to do this? What do you want? What would be best? Is it a check-in? Is it me? How do you want? I do think that balance of involvement. Are you doing well? Are you happy? How are you feeling about specialty choice? How are you feeling about taking care of patients? Which exams are stressful right now? On some intermittent basis, I think is heavy. Just being able to talk and process it, depending on the personality of your student, is, I think, the most important. But it is going to be individualized. Because I know my daughter won't want me to call every day. That's not how she works. Did I see another hand? Oh, okay. Please.
Are you trying to make sure that the students get adequate sleep every night?
Yeah, I think even during difficult clerkships, where you're running 80 to 90 hours and waking up at 4:30, a pretty clear indication, both from my experience and from sleep studies, that you have to have a certain amount of sleep, right? Now, everyone has different levels. Some can do 5, some can do 8. But a student needs to pay attention to what is the right amount of sleep for them to function. And when you're waking up every day to get into OB-GYN at 4:30, you're not going to be able to put in the same amount of nighttime hours studying that you would if you're waking up and have to get to class at 1 p.m. So they're going to have to adjust that. They're going to have to pay, I think, close attention to their sleep and also to their diet. And the third thing I've encouraged them to do is, even if it's not part of their routine, is to exercise. Those 3 things are going to help keep them healthy. With some variation, and your students will need to be attuned to that. Please.
Is there a list of resources somewhere online maybe of like how we can access like CHIP and like Medicaid and stuff like that for students and families?
We do have some on our website at medicine.utah.edu. Much of that is actually probably going to also come through main campus support services in the student affairs office there. And it does depend on what we're talking about. If it is, again, in the mental health, wellness, counseling side, that would be our wellness program. If it's going to be in the insurance, tuition, loan piece, that's going to be Wendy in the back. And Wendy, I saw your hand. Did you have a comment?
I just wanted, for the people who are watching on YouTube, it might be helpful if you repeat.
Oh, repeat the question. Sorry, thank you.
The mics in front of you guys also work, so if you just tap the little buttons on them, we'll all be able to hear you really well.
Perfect, thank you. So I think it depends exactly on what, but there are resources on our webpage, on main campus webpage, and then just talking with us individually about housing, for example. We send out an announcement to the classes. About 2 months ago, we had a fire in Salt Lake City that displaced a couple of students, and we send out some resources for them to be able to get some help with housing. Additionally, I know that the wellness program is intermittently able to offer therapy to partners and spouses, depending on their load. Right now, there's a waiting list, so they're not able to offer that. If that changes, I will let you know. I do know that main campus is able to do some couples therapy for any students that feel that is a need that they have. We're excited to have your students. We love them. This is going to be an exceptional journey. Band together, talk with them. Feel free to again join our support group. I'm excited to hopefully see all of you at our white coat ceremony tomorrow. 10 a.m. is the start time. I think your students need to be there. Is it 9:30? I can't remember. 9:15, yes, to watch them get coded and get a stethoscope, and it's a great ceremony. We love having the white coat. Happy to take individual questions up front. We'll let you get to celebrating your last night as a non-student before you matriculate after your white coat ceremony. Yes?
I'm only asking because it might be relevant for other people. How long should we expect the white coat ceremony to be?
We schedule it to be a 2-hour from 10 to noon. We typically get out just a little bit before that, depending on how long it takes to coat people. But enough time that I think noon, then you can go have a lunch together. We do have some food outside for those who want to, but we should be done by around noon. Yeah, so are you allowed to take pictures of the White Coat Ceremony? You can. I think we hire a few very strong members of my staff to be bouncers so that you're not jumping the stage. But I think there's a picture line there that you can come down and take pictures of them. And then certainly afterwards out in the lobby and whatnot as well.
So the students will all line up on the steps in front of the Kingsbury Hall, and there'll be professional pictures taken of their class in their white coats. And they will stay after the professionals are finished so that the families can take pictures of the whole class. And then, of course, you can pull your student aside to take pictures anytime.
Great. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you for coming. Thanks for sharing your students with us.